Update: I don't know how to help my wife's anorexia, which she developed after I blew our savings buying my mother a house. I talked to my wife Allie when I came down for Christmas after my mom's house sold, and based on what I'd been reading, I pushed the eating disorder thing a bit in my initial opening to the conversation. She just sat and listened to me. I told her I was scared about her starving herself, that she could die, that I empathized because I had an addiction too. Called her out on the pro-ana sites and lack of food. I don't think I'll ever forget her reaction after I finally shut up. She just laughed. This really cold and angry kind of laugh I have honestly never heard come out of her mouth in the almost decade I've known her. I literally just had a nightmare about it the other night. It was followed by her saying, "Are you serious right now?" She launched into what can only be described as an avalanche of anger and incredulity wrapped in a bomb. She ranted on for about 10 minutes. She said that in the beginning of the year when she'd left, she apparently got really into fitness and nutrition and after a couple of months started training for a half marathon. She pulled up her calories in an app on her phone and gave it to me. They were all probably more than what I eat, mostly tofu, rice, beans, veggies, and protein supplements. Always over 2,000 calories a day. She told me that she'd worked her way up from nothing to going 10 miles a day. She loved it, but I was so engrossed in my own addiction and 12-step stuff that she didn't really mention it because she didn't want me to crap on that too, because I had a habit of not really saying much about her accomplishments. She kept it up all year until fall when she went back to SoCal. I didn't mention it in my last post because I didn't think it was pertinent, but I had a relapse in late September, early October. It spent a lot of cash we didn't have, but I guess I didn't really realize how that would affect her. She apparently couldn't afford to eat. She stopped training because she couldn't buy enough groceries to even eat enough in general. She started crying and practically yelling at this point and told me about how her stomach started growling during one of her classes loudly, to the point where another teacher came up to her between classes and asked her about it. I'll never forget, ever, Allie yelling at me and saying, "Do you have any idea how humiliated I was?" I felt, and still feel, like an absolute piece of crap. The pro-ana sites were bookmarked from early October, not in her recent browser history like I'd thought. She said she ended up there after Google searches had lended results that amount to just eat food when she literally could not. She said she felt disgusting and horrible even reading through those sites, but that they were the only things that got her through her classes without public humiliation. She said that practically not eating for a month was agony. The amount of guilt I feel is incredible. I asked her why she didn't say anything, and she said that after multiple conversations about money and begging me to budget she finally gave up and just got her own bank account. She did bring up what was mentioned here, about my thinking of her as so strong and unbreakable and how much pressure that put on her. She was crying at this point more than yelling, saying how she lost her best friend to an addiction and how this hadn't been a partnership in a long time and how alone she felt. How the program was almost as bad as my addiction because it was the only thing that started to matter to me. I guess she had a point. I went to almost 2 meetings a day. It was like a second job. We talked a lot about all of this, but I eventually did convince her to come back to Oregon and work on our marriage. I made a big effort and got a new therapist too in addition to the one I had. We started counseling together. I hired a financial advisor and started to seriously budget. We bought a house with the profits from my mom's place. At this point, I really thought the update I'd be writing was, it wasn't anorexia, I was a jerk, but with therapy and love it's happily ever after. But I, of course, had to go and royally screw this like I always do. In my new therapy sessions, my therapist helped me realize that a lot of my issues come from a place of not knowing who I am. He gave me a lot of homework assignments, one of which was on who I thought I was supposed to be in a marriage and if that was who I wanted to be. I don't really know what happened, but I was so tired of feeling guilty and tired of feeling like I failed as a husband and just sick of therapy and everything. I was tired of working hard all the time emotionally. I missed my addiction, I missed not feeling so much responsibly. I was tired of strict budgets. I just fantasized about back when I was in college and single and none of it mattered. What I wrote on the page was raw and full of resentments I didn't know I even had and had a lot of stuff about Allie. I looked at it after I wrote it and it didn't even sound like me. It wasn't even true. I was just angry and hurt and feeling so much shame it was like I couldn't handle it anymore. It honestly disturbed me how ugly it sounded, because they were things I didn't know I even thought about. I left the paper on my desk and figured I'd look at it when I got back from work. Long story short, Allie found it. Allie read it. I came home with a note taped to it that simply said, "I do not deserve this." She's right. She doesn't. She moved everything she had to the office and divided rooms while I was at work. She even put a lock on the door. I sent an email trying to explain that I didn't even mean it but got no response. She literally didn't speak to me for 2 weeks and would walk out of the room when I came in. A week ago she sat me down and told me that since we just bought the house, we'd likely lose thousands in closing costs so it didn't make sense to sell. I agreed. She told me that she was, however, filing for a divorce. And possibly going back to California. Then she left. It has hurt just writing this and remembering it, because I think I broke the heart of the woman I love more than anything. And she's gone and I miss her so much. She's back to not speaking to me. Half of me wants to beg her to come back, but I don't think I can keep any of the promises I have been making to her. I think I need to be single for a while and just focus on therapy. I don't know what's wrong with me or why I keep doing these things that hurt myself and others, but I need to get a handle on that before I think of tackling anything else. It cost me my marriage. It almost cost me my job. I think it's robbed my whole life. Allie seems good from what I've seen. Her sides of the fridge and pantry are filled with food and I saw her eating a giant salad the other day on the deck. So yeah. I think the eating disorder wasn't a thing, just something I clung to as not to have to focus on me anymore. I saw her the other day at the gym. This guy with bulging muscles was chatting her up near the weights and I thought I heard him ask her to dinner. She did that adorable blushing thing she did back when we were first dating, and I don't know what she said but I feel nauseous thinking about it. I hate myself. I want to hate muscle guy too, but I just can't. Update 2. My girlfriend was roped and then isolated herself from me due to trauma, but then cheated on me and tried to get her therapist to convince me to forgive her. Wednesday night I had a knock on my door. Lo and behold, it is my girlfriend's sister and my sister. Her sister Susan was holding papers. Obviously something is up, so I ask what's wrong and her sister hands me a printout of my posts and the replies to my previous 2 threads and she simply asks, "Is this you?" At first I tried to deny it. I couldn't really remember everything I had written, in particular the first post, so I was kind of trying to avoid any problems if I said something I shouldn't have. But my sister just straight up got in my face and told me to stop lying, which by then I was caught. I knew and she knew it. I just dropped my head. This then led to a very long conversation that lasted till the wee hours of the morning. At first her sister was very emotional because of course she loves her sister and was crying asking me how I could want to do this to her. Much to my surprise though, my sister stood up for me here and actually kind of ripped her sister a new a-hole. She said that I had gone way beyond what most people had and that Sarah should not 1 year later still be withholding affection from me. She had no idea that we still weren't physically as close as we once were. Like I said, I never told her. Once my sister got done talking, Susan said that in reality she knew that she was right. She begged me to not go through with my letter. She said that I had promised to give Sarah a week. She then gave a very impassioned speech about how much she can tell I still love her and how much she knows she still loves me. My sister also agreed that there was too much love present in my heart to just do this right away. She said, and it made sense at the time, "What is another week compared to what you have been through?" So long story short, I agreed to not take the letter over. Whether it was guilt, regret or love I can't say, but I agreed to it. This then led to the single most embarrassing thing in my life happening. Susan gave me a very big hug and cried as they were leaving. It's been a very long time since I've had any type of close contact, and let's just say it's not a lot of fun being called a disgusting pig by your sister. All I could do was say how very sorry and how embarrassed I was. Fortunately Susan seemed to take it in stride. She just wanted to make sure that I would talk with Sarah the next day. Even though I was a virtual zombie from lack of sleep, I went ahead and went to work. I have lots of PTO time available to me, but I didn't want to burn it all up over this in case I needed time later. I got home from work and my intention was to go straight to bed after eating dinner and maybe watching some TV. That went to hell in a hurry as I was eating my dinner when someone knocked on my door again. This time it was Susan and Sarah. This time Sarah is holding the printout. You can tell they both had been crying and Susan asked if they could come in. I just shook my head yes, because I was honestly a little nervous, and no matter what she has done or not done, seeing Sarah emotionally always upsets me, and she physically looked horrible. I mean as bad as she did after the rope. They sat on the couch and Sarah already had tears streaming down her face. We all kind of just sat there for what seemed like an eternity looking at each other. I wasn't going to speak first. I had no idea what to say or do, so I just sat there. Eventually I broke though and asked Sarah if she wanted some water or something to drink. She actually said yes, so I got up and went to the kitchen to get her a glass of ice water, and when I turned around she was standing right behind me. All she said to me was, "Are you really going to leave me?" I couldn't answer. I just looked into her eyes and felt broken and ashamed. We went and sat down, but this time she sat next to me. She started to read my first post to me but could not make it through it. Susan jumps in at this point and says they had spent the day talking and they had gone over the post and most of the replies, and said that Sarah was very sorry for how she treated me. She said that they have spoken to their parents and everybody agrees that the way I was treated was not fair. Seeing it in writing really struck a nerve with all of them because they could see how hurt I was, and that even though I could have blamed all of them, that I didn't. Sarah is shaking her head yes the entire time. Sarah then managed to talk and just laid out how she obviously did not give me enough consideration and that she now sees that what she did was horrible to me when I have been nothing but compassionate and loving towards her. She begged me for another chance. She said that sometimes in life you need a kick in the butt to get moving, and she said me wanting to break up with her was her wake-up call. She can't and won't take me for granted and said she had a year's worth of apologizing to do to me. Susan actually very calmly said that they had spoken at length in the afternoon about her infidelity and then not even touching me. Sarah then replied that she had no real excuses. She knows that what she did was horrible and that she had no right to ask me for forgiveness but was going to anyway. She also said that she is making it the top priority of her life that she talk with her therapist to get past any physical limitations she has with me. This went on for a long time. I could give you a lot more of what was said, but this is already a wall of text as it is. The one thing though that I want to say is that while she was talking to me she was holding my hand. She reached out and took it. Now I realize that she read my posts and I made a big deal about that in my posts, but whether she did it because she read it or just did it on her own, I won't deny that it felt really good. They ended up staying the night. Susan slept on the futon and Sarah on the couch, and I actually went to my bed. I called in early Thursday morning to work before I went to bed as I knew that I would not be able to function on so little sleep. I get awoken around 10 by Sarah sitting next to me in the bed rubbing her hands on my arm to wake me up. She said that they were getting ready to leave because she had moved up her therapy session to 11 and she didn't want to leave without her telling me how much she loved me and to let me know she was coming right back after the session. She leaned over and kissed me. It wasn't a long passionate kiss, in fact it was just kind of a quick kiss but right on the lips. This was a mistake I'm sure, because that broke my resolve right there. Up until that point I was still holding on to the thought that this was all just words and that it took me threatening to leave her to get her to even pay attention to me. I went back to sleep and around 1 she showed back up at my place carrying lunch. Susan was not in tow, so it was just going to be the two of us. We ended up spending the afternoon together. We ended up spending the weekend together, and we even had intimacy. I'll just say that I was probably more scared about it than she was. I was worried about triggering anything or saying or doing anything that would upset her. She on the other hand was very loving and emotional about it. She cried afterwards for a good long while, which caused me to freak, but she said it was a combination of joy and regret. That she had forgotten how love felt and it just kind of overwhelmed her. We laid there for hours. She had the recommendation from her therapist for a couples counselor who we are going to start seeing next week. For the first time in over a year I have been happy for 4 days. I know that this isn't the end, that we are still going to have hurdles to overcome. I honestly believe that this was a wake-up call for her. If not, then why go through all of the emotional drama and turmoil? Wouldn't she just let it go? Bottom line is I love her. I have always loved her, and all I wanted was for her to show me she loved me as well. This past weekend was a really bonding experience for me and for her as well. I think we can build something new together. Update 3. My girlfriend was roped and then isolated herself from me due to trauma, but then cheated on me and tried to get her therapist to convince me to forgive her. Last week my girlfriend Sarah wanted me to attend her Friday therapy session with her to provide me with additional information regarding things that had happened over the past year, specifically in regards to her being with someone else. I went to the office and was expecting the absolute worst. I was expecting that she either had been with other people as well or she had been with this guy since she agreed to quit. I actually got there before she did and got to sit in awkward silence in the waiting room until she came in. The therapist tells me that Sarah has something she wants me to see and she hands me a handwritten journal that she has been keeping since the first week they started therapy. Sarah starts bawling and buries her face in her lap, and there are 2 post-it notes being used as bookmarks that I am to read. The first post-it note was very early in the book, and in it she describes our first meeting at her parents' house from her point of view. In the book she wrote, "Chad was very cold and distant from me," and goes on to talk about wondering if I thought she did this on purpose and if she was ruined. It kept spiraling down until she started to have bitter feelings towards me because of it. If you remember from my very first post, I was instructed to act this way by her mother. She said when she saw my post it immediately struck her that we were both talking about the same night. She has since confronted her mother about this and confirmed my version of the story. As it turns out, this was not the advice of the therapist, nor was this advice from a doctor. This was advice they were given by a rope advocate who was with Sarah in the ER. This woman literally told them to not let me near her until she wanted me there. Nobody ever asked her, she thought I didn't want to be there. This was more of a kick in the gut than I can describe accurately. Every single damn thing that went downhill from there was because a man-hating woman told them to keep us apart. I have already filed a complaint with the hospital administration and they have asked for a written statement which I am sending to them. How different would the last year have been if this person had not interjected herself into our lives? Both of us thought neither of us initially wanted to be around the other, when in fact that was the furthest thing from the truth. Now honestly it does not explain everything else that happened, like her distance with me even almost a year later, but that was the catalyst for everything. We spent almost the entire hour talking about that part, then I went to read the second post-it note that was about midway through the journal. She wrote very vividly about the day it occurred, and 2 things are coming from this. 1. She had been placed under a 72-hour detention at the hospital. Apparently the night it occurred she tried to take her life. Her sister is the one who found her and she was told by Sarah to not ever tell me about that. The second thing she wrote about was her cheating. It was her second day at the new job and she was working the second shift and a group of people were in the break room eating. She was the new girl and this is an all-male workforce. Of course, being the new person, they were all very friendly trying to get to know her better. She wrote that one guy John sat right next to her and kept talking to her and asking about her, and as the others were leaving to go back to their work she was getting up and John grabbed her thigh and told her to hold on and not be in a rush. She wrote that once he grabbed her thigh she froze up in fear. She had no idea what to do or what was happening, but eventually when everyone else was gone he started to do intimate things to her. At this point in time someone walked past the door so he backed off and she was able to leave. She was able to leave that night without having to see him again. The journal was handwritten in several different colors of ink, and if she did just write this before we went there she would have had to handwrite in excess of 100 pages. So this leads me to asking several questions, not the least of which is why did you let me think that you had cheated on me for almost 6 months without ever telling me what actually happened? In her mind she said that she felt like she didn't stop him and that she thought I would consider it cheating anyway no matter how it happened. She also said that she felt very guilty about not saying no or anything for that matter, and that is what led her to take the meds and try to take too high of a dose. She had even told her therapist that she had cheated on me and never told her the extent of the story until recently. So when we went to the first meeting the therapist was acting on the same information I was. So that happened Friday. I told her that I needed some time to process my thoughts and would get a hold of her on Saturday. I exited and she stayed behind to do some one-on-one with her therapist. At the end of the day I think a lot of this has been very much dumb luck. But dumb luck doesn't take away the bitterness I have built up over the past year. I came to some conclusions Friday night and Saturday and I went over them with her on Sunday. I feel like I have taken a back seat to everybody and everything for over a year now. I've placed my life on hold and honestly felt neglected. I now see some of that was due to outside interference, but I also see some of that as my fault for not standing up for myself and letting this get out of my control. So while I know this is really going to tick some of you off, here is where it stands and likely be the last thing I say on it. I want her back in my life. She wants to be in my life. I love her and she loves me. That being said, I have to put myself in a place where she can be a part of my life, not just me trying to fit into hers. I will be involved from Sunday forward in all parts of her recovery. I will be consulted on any changes, progress or updates. She is going to be moving back in with me, but not until after I return from a vacation. I am taking 1 week all to myself and I am going on vacation. I would have been happy to go somewhere with her, but since she has changed jobs she has no time off available to her. I have enrolled both of us in a self-defense class. She thought this was a great idea and really likes that we can do this together. Her family and I had a heart-to-heart Monday night. I got a lot of things off of my chest that I had wanted to say, and to their credit they never got mad or defensive. I know for a fact that they were doing what they thought was best for Sarah. Yes, her sister was teasing me about my accident with her. I'm not sure who had more fun making me turn red, Sarah or Susan. But in the end they also agreed to making me part of the team. Overall the rest of the week has been kind of business as usual. She has absolutely kept her word about trying to make things right. She is much more the Sarah I remember. We both know that we have a long way to go, but we both believe in each other.